What is up, fellow sickos? I'm Dan Valley, joined by my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. It's post-mortem time. The Memphis Grizzlies have fallen, like we all expected, to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And now it's time to talk about their future. Grant, are you ready to dig in?
I'm ready to decide if the Memphis Grizzlies, as we know them, get to continue to exist. Is that what we're here to talk about?
It's very existential and foreboding and spot on. So we have to start with just where exactly do they go from here? Let's look at some of just really quickly relay it to you for anyone watching on YouTube. It's on the screen. They're heading into the offseason. They can get to a little more than $7 million in cap space without making any other moves. That is with Santi Aldama's $11.9 million restricted free agency hold. Does not include a hold for Luke Kennard, though. That's big, obviously. We all want Luke Kennard to get a max deal. Jaren Jackson Jr.'s contract situation is interesting. He, in all likelihood, will be eligible for a 5-year, $345 million max extension. If not, because the Grizzlies can get cap space, they can do what is called a renegotiate and extend. What that will effectively do, Grant, correct me if I make this too complex, they can bump up his salary for next season, and then they can extend him 140%, give him a 140% raise off that number. So as an example, because he's making 24 million or whatever it is, let's say they bump him up to 30 million next year. He gets that immediate pay increase, and now they can extend him moving forward for a starting salary at $42.6 million. Still not his max, but way more palatable to sign an extension, like in the first year of his deal. None of that might matter, though, because our guess would be, if they're not announced as you're listening to this, he's going to make all NBA, right? And qualify for that Supermax.
We both had him there. I think he's deserved it based on his play this season. So yeah, that he's gonna be eligible for whether or not he gets it. I think is one of the most fascinating questions of any team's offseason for that 5-year big contract.
And you don't have to get like we saw Rudy Gobert did not sign for he was Supermax eligible, but did not get the full Supermax. But you're still looking at it in terms of, are we committing even 30% of the salary cap over the next X amount of years to this player? And that's not an insignificant commitment to make to someone who, as good as he is, he's never looked like a number one offensive option. We saw him have limitations in the series against the Thunder. But I think, like, I don't even know, where do you start with this team when evaluating them, Grant? It's like, okay, cap space, if they have it, it's only to renegotiate and extend Jaren Jackson Jr. because $7 million, you'd rather operate over the cap, use the full non-taxpayer mid-level. So you're kind of looking at trades, right? If you're going to upgrade this team in any meaningful way.
How and then the subsequent question, yes, you're right. How do you make trades to improve on the margins with the salaries they have on the books? Like, is that possible? Or do you have to start looking at moving bigger pieces?
I guess they still have draft equity, even though they gave away this year's first round pick to offload the Marcus Smart contract. But to your point, Brandon Clark is their 4th highest paid player next season right now. Maybe that becomes Santi Aldama at some point, but like they're not going to trade him in that scenario. John Contra at $6.2 million is their 5th highest paid player. And so if you stack their contracts on top of each other, you're not in big time player territory. You're in, oh, could we get, I'm just throwing names around the price. Like, you're in Anthony Simons territory, who they don't need, to be clear. You're in DeAndre Hunter. Like, that's the type of, is that, because if you're not looking at that, Grant, aren't we effectively asking, is it time to bust up the big three?
So this is the central question, I think, and we'll get to, because you're better at this stuff than I am, like who's the right kind of fit or what might some trades look like. I think you have that's the threshold question. It is the Ja Bane Morant, or Ja Bane and Morant. So that's 2 people. Is the Jackson Bane Morant trio good enough to keep intact and go forward saying we just need to like tinker, we need to improve on the margins? I think we get, I'll just say and you can plead guilty or innocent if you want, but I think I find it too easy to say this core isn't good enough, both in this case and like generally, because like good enough, I think means like we think they could win a championship. And that's a super high bar, especially for a small market team where that just isn't always the goal. Yep. So normally I would say like, yeah, it's pretty clear that this team has real flaws. these three guys are already, you've already paid all three of these guys. Like you're 1, 2, and 3. Like you can't like who, there's not someone you're going to bring in from the outside. You just explained like the trade restrictions salary wise. Like you can't bring someone in that makes more than one of these three guys, especially if Jackson gets the new deal, whichever form that takes. Like these are your top three players. So normally you'd say like, well, clearly they're not good enough. They, had to fight to get into the playoffs to begin with. There's the Ja off court stuff. There's the Ja durability stuff. There's Bane being like maybe topped out already. There's Jackson, being good, but like we said, like you said, not number one option, all that stuff.
What was that game one? He had more turnovers, 3, than defensive rebounds, 0 against the Thunder.
You've had a coaching change too. So like there's all
Right.
these things you normally would say like, all right, this is run its course. I think given their ages and given the commitments you've already made, they're 25, 25, and 26, given the restrictions you have, given the fact that like you're either going to go forward with Thomas Isolo or find someone else to coach this team, I kind of think you got to give it another year. I came to that today because before that I was like, not good enough, blow it up. And then I'm like trying to catch myself and be a little more level-headed about it. Because don't you think like, I guess the counter argument is like, we have enough information and maybe that's right. But I just think like practically speaking, if you blow this up, it's like, you're going to be bad for several years probably.
Because
So
you don't trade a member of the big three and get better.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, I think it comes down to, yes, I know they have Jalen Wells was injured, but he was not winning them the Thunder series. That's still the type. It's not the Jalen Wells type of player, but when you look at the makeup of this roster, I think that between using Jaren at the 5 and just having Zach Edey, for sure, it's you look at it and say it's still like the 3, like the combo forward wing area where you need to get a higher end option there. And if you believe that higher end option needs to be a star, that's, I think, where you get into kind of do we bust up the big 3 things? But if you think this team could be good enough, because I'm with you and I'm guilty of it. I will say this team is not good enough as currently constructed. They're so deep as we saw, but that unraveled a little bit in the regular season. And I think we've also kind of seen they're not playoff deep either. When you're kind of
but I think that could change. I think organically, because I think given the ages of the best 3 players they have, it's possible that Jackson is this good or slightly better next year. I think it's possible that Morant and Bane, same thing. We've seen Morant be better than this. Now we can get into the like that I can't stop ever talking about the lifespan, the prime lifespan of a player like Morant, who just had another massive fall in that series. Like that's scary. But you mentioned Edey and you mentioned Wells. Like those are 2 rookies that played like major minutes this year. I think both of them, the expectation should be that they're better. Now they both are like not super high ceiling guys. And maybe that's like part of the reason they were drafted like for floors perhaps, but like both those guys could get a little better. Then that makes it seem like you don't need a star to get this team over the hump. Say there's like 5 incremental improvements, or at least nobody gets worse. And then you're talking, like that's why I lean towards like, we don't need to do anything drastic, but if they're going to do something, you're right. It's got to be someone that like makes it so that Wells is not so important to the success of the team. Like he's way overstretched for his draft slot and just like what kind of player he is.
Now, are you saying that you think they can become good enough organically without making any type of move?
To be like a
real contender, not, look at how they're top 5 in offense and defense for 2/3 of the regular season. More of a real, they're beating good teams. You would pick them to win a playoffs, like 2 playoff series.
I think it's possible. Okay. I don't know if I'd say it's likely, but I think it's possible enough that I would go that way before I start doing like major reconstructions. I think, does that make that feels like a cop out, but it's like the chance is great enough for me that would sway me towards let's see one more year. And maybe it's like, we'll know in December, like, nope, like this ain't it. But I think it's worth it to me to see.
Do you think, so I from your standpoint then, because I guess I'm honestly undecided still. I'm trying to kind of talk through it. But based off what you're saying, if we say that is possible, then doing something like trading for Dorian Finney-Smith as they passed on near the trade deadline, or going after DeAndre Hunter if he became available again as Cleveland goes into the second apron, or maybe looking at, can we just combine salaries and get Jeremy Grant?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think like those would have to be the types of moves that you could make and then say, we are better enough to hold ourselves to that bar?
Yeah, maybe. And I think specifically, so the Marcus Smart trade was a mistake. Like that just didn't work out for a number of reasons.
You could argue
But
both the Marcus Smart trades were a mistake.
yeah, which one are you talking about? The first one is the one I'm talking about specifically when they got Marcus Smart, but you're right. I also think the target needs to be an adult in the room. And maybe that won't matter, but I think that was maybe the most misguided part of the Marcus Smart trade is like he left Boston and everybody was like, thank God, like, man, he wouldn't, like all the talk of like, he wouldn't shut up. Like maybe the Grizzlies just really mischaracterized or like missed on who they thought he was locker room wise. But I do think that you need someone that, like, I don't know, it can't be this guy, but like, man, this team would get a lot of mileage out of like Jeff Green just being there, like that's not the player they need. That's the
You think Udonis Haslem would come out of retirement?
Oh, please. They maybe, so you probably can't get both, but because you need the guy that's really going to play like Finney Smith. I think that'd be fantastic.
You know who it is? Bring Steven Adams back.
I mean, I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. But if you could you need two things. If you can get him in one, great. But you need the like, okay, this guy takes Jalen Wells' spot in the starting lineup or closing lineup. And then you need like at least one sage presence to just kind of rein in the bullshit, especially if like you're going to have a first year coach or you're going to have some new coach that doesn't have pre-existing relationships with the stars here who like in that scenario, like you might just, they might just feel like they don't have to listen to anybody, so you need like, I think it's such a hack thing to say, but like there needs to be like some veteran stuff happening there for like accountability purposes.
No, I don't think that's lame. I think that's a really salient point. It does kind of bleed in though to the next part of this, which I'm not necessarily advocating for, but should trading Jaren Jackson Jr. be off the table? Now, if you're going I think, look, maybe this all starts with Ja Morant. But I also, for a lot of the stuff you said about Ja, the durability specifically, the limitations still as a shooter, maybe the shorter window of his prime, you can't, you could say, all right, move him. Other teams are going to have the same feelings that we're having. And so someone might value him more than the Grizzlies are like, are you sure you're getting a haul? But I think it's easy to say, yeah, of course you would at least consider trading Jaren if you're going to tear it down. But you also have to consider the long-term viability of keeping this team together.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and as I mentioned before, like, how do you get better if you trade Ja? Or because you could just say, well, if we don't want this top heavy of a payroll, you move Ja or Bane and kind of reorient the roster. It's just hard to get better when you do that. And even if maybe it's not a payroll thing, but we want to balance out the positional spectrum of how we're divvying up. Like, be an interesting challenge trade. I don't think this guy's a good enough shooter, but like Desmond Bane for Franz Wagner would be
that'd be interesting. Yeah.
So you could go that route, but let's just say that you're not going the absolutely nuclear, we're tearing it down route. Knowing how Memphis operates and how does it also affect, like, is Zach Kleiman even safe here? But like, if you're the Grizzlies, is moving Jaren Jackson Jr., if he's going to command, what if he just says like, I want the Supermax, otherwise I'm going to test free agency? Does that need to be on the table then for you?
I understand why that might be where the thinking would go. But man, like he hamstrings you if that is out, and the reason you're shopping him is because you don't want to give him that deal. Any team that acquires him knows it's on the hook for a 1-year rental, or they're going to have to pay the guy. Don't you think though? I guess my answer is like, you got to think about it if that's what it comes to. But I'm kind of persuaded that like Jackson, I think, is certainly still like a positive trade value guy if he's on the renegotiate and extend. Maybe not at the 5 for 345. The sticker shock, the raw numbers are like, I'm still not adjusted to those, like cap percentage wise.
35% of the cap is what it would be on the books for. I don't think he's an attractive asset at that number because
probably not.
There were limitations, and maybe this says more about the person around it, but there are limitations defensively with him at the 5 this year. And just for as much as he's grown on offense, is this like do you consider him a number 2 option type material on the offensive end yet?
I
He's
mean,
closer to that than he's ever been if he's not. For
yeah,
sure.
he's close. He's close. And I do think that he is easy to fit around, because like you can just play a Zach Edey type at center, and Jackson's ideal as like
Mhm.
a big, a big rover that can space the floor on offense, So like I think he has like pretty broad appeal in ways that someone like Morant probably doesn't, and Bane probably doesn't at that price point, because Bane is just kind of, he's a 2, and he's not quite an all-star, and he's paid like an all, you know what I mean? Like I think
Yeah.
Jackson has the most trade value, and I guess that's also just an argument for why, like, no, he's the guy to hold on to, move the others. But then the counter is like, you can't get as much for those others. I don't know. Jackson feels like someone you could keep around if you were doing a hard rebuild or a soft one, and it just would make sense. But like, man, I think I don't want to trade him unless it's like 5 for 345. And then I have to really have that conversation, I think.
Now, between Ja Morant and Desmond Bane, if you're keeping Jaren Jackson Jr., I'm not necessarily you're obligated to be competitive, but like you kind of, if you're going to keep him, it means you're paying
Yeah.
him, and so you are.
Yeah.
Which, if you could, and because I'm not saying it's impossible, who has, or who would it be easier to upgrade from or change up the look of the roster from and be better? I guess basically, would you rather have, let's dangle Ja Morant in trade talks and move forward with Bane and Jackson as the core that we're trying to pair this next player with, or flip it and we're putting Bane on the market and we're moving forward with Jaren Jackson Jr. and that's what we're trying to upgrade like the roster around using
Well,
Bane as the trade chip?
well, I mean, I kind of like the thought of, and tell me what you think. Scottie Pippen's your point guard now. Bane's still there. Somehow magically you've moved off Ja for $0, or what you've traded him for.
$0.
I'm just trying to imagine the reconfigured version of the Grizzlies, that instead of a guy making Ja's salary, instead of Ja, you have a guy making Ja's number who's a 3 or a 4. That like is roughly equivalent, like, NBA hierarchy positionally to Ja at that spot. I don't know who that is, because Ja's value right now is like really hard to pin down. You know what I mean? Like it's Pippen, Bane. I don't know. We'll just say player at wing X,
Oh,
Jackson and
would be
Edey.
a wild challenge trade. I don't know if they would do it. Ja Morant for Scoot Henderson and Denny Avdia.
Oh my God. Where do I order my Grizzlies jersey?
Okay, so that's like a hard no from Portland's perspective.
Oh, I don't know. I'm excited if that happens for Memphis. Yeah, I don't know. Portland would have to really love Ja and decide that Scoot is not going to be it, and I think they're not convinced of either of those things. But that I think it's an interesting thought experiment, like, because Ja very much is like, he is the poster, he's the signature Grizzlies player. Like he's the guy, like he's the biggest star there. He's reached the highest highs probably in terms of like best peaks of the 3 guys that are the core of that team. But what do they look like with someone on the wing and Pippen at the point with Bane and like, I don't know. It's they just feel like a weird, like more stable, like normal team.
Is he not good enough to do there? I think there'd have to be other stuff involved, but just because Utah does need a floor general of the future, unless you really believe it's Keontae George, Isaiah Collier, if you build something around Lauri Markkanen to Memphis and pair him with Bane, Scottie Pippen, and Jaren Jackson Jr., does that? Other stuff is included for Memphis's perspective. I just don't know. It's weird because I'm saying other stuff would need to go to Memphis because I don't think Lauri Markkanen's contract doesn't look too great after this year. You could chalk it up to whatever Utah was, but it doesn't look great. But I'm also just like, if I'm Utah, I don't know if I'm like want to do that.
That's a tough one. That's like a couple of kind of distressed assets. I'm into that idea, because I do think you insulate Markkanen with Jackson and Edey as just an enormous front court. Markkanen offensively can play the 3. And then I think you could probably get just the sheer size of the front court, and Jackson maybe guard some wings, I guess, or at least could clean up messes when Markkanen gets cooked by like a 6'7" by like one of the Thompsons or something. I
have one more wonky one.
Please.
Base framework. Ja, I don't know what the other moving pieces are. Ja for Giannis. Because if he doesn't want to be in Milwaukee can't get all its picks back anyway. So maybe you still want to be competitive. You're then trying to figure out the Dame situation. But if you're moving Giannis, I can almost bet that Dame is not sticking around anyway. And so it's, okay, we don't have our picks, but we still have, he's on just his first max contract still. And then we try and build around Ja. and we're getting other picks as part of that from other teams. So we don't have our own picks. We can still be competitive because we potentially have this 10-pull star as well as I would assume other draft equity.
I mean, Memphis, that's another one. Memphis is like, yes, please, I think. And then the
interesting. I would question Giannis and Jaren's kind of a glove, like
I'm willing. I'd like to see what that looks like. I'm willing to check it out. You have my attention with that one. But you're right. Like, I don't know about that one. Like fit wise, it's weird.
The moral of the story is I think we agree that they're not going to go the nuclear route, and
Probably
I don't
not.
think it's going to be easier. And it's always easier fresh off it for them to say go the nuclear route.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the two inflection points would be: is Jaren going to be okay if you don't want to give him the supermax? Like, is that something you can then still work out?
Yeah.
But the other one too, and we haven't talked about this. Like, if they make any moves in the front office, would that signal to you that, oh, maybe they are open to going the more nuclear route?
Yeah, probably. Cause then it's like the new executive is not tied to guys that he drafted or developed or is like, signed off on or whatever. That just seems like it generally makes that easier, I guess. Although I don't know, that wasn't what I thought about the Horst extension initially, but you kind of talked me back around on that one. Do you think Jackson is going to be, because we're all wringing our hands about like, oh man, this second apron and like Boston's going to have to be the litmus test for a team's tolerance for how good can a team be and be super expensive. Like, is Jackson maybe going to be the guy that eligible for a supermax team in normal circumstances would just do it? And this time not going to happen. And that's just like the new normal where just because you're eligible for it, that's not the bar anymore. Like it has to be just no brainer. Like, and it's different than a rookie extension where it's like, you just give it to Franz and Cade and Mobley and whatever, and Halliburton. But it's like, and Maxey, or no, Maxey didn't get it. Did he? Or did he? I can't remember.
He got it.
He
didn't get the extension. He just, they waited till free agency.
But maybe Jackson's the guy where it's like, we don't just rubber stamp those anymore. Not in this cap environment, sir.
That's a great point, because I think that's where we're headed, to where I think that if it was this summer and Jaylen Brown was eligible for it, I think that becomes a different conversation than it was a couple years ago.
Well, and it's not just the team's tolerance for or fear of the second apron. It's the like, okay, go out and see what you can get. Nobody's got money to spend. Like you're just, I think that's, maybe that's different in 26, but it's like, I think it's just a lot. It's going to be, things are going to get a little tighter, I think, with some of these extensions. And I think that's probably a good thing. Not for players, but for like not having a bunch of teams that can't do anything, which is where we're sort of headed. If teams don't get more careful,
it's a great thing for ownership, but it's probably a good thing for the fans, because it's less likely that your teams get trapped,
get stuck,
toxic cap
sheets. Yeah. There you go. We're not just rooting for owners; we're rooting for fan experience.
And speaking of fan experiences, one of our Discord members asked this, Braden. There's like a Ja Morant for Trae Young challenge trade being floated around the Twitter sphere. I saw it before the Ja Morant hip injury, but like, who's the team that says no to that? And am I wrong for thinking that it should be Atlanta? You know how I looked at it though? I do value Trae Young. I think I think he's a more dynamic scorer, and he is the better passer. Ja's probably the better defender, but it's actually close.
It doesn't matter though. They're both not good. So like, who cares?
What's kind of the turning point for me? I was like, Trae Young's contract's a little bit shorter, so if you gotta like get out of it like that, that's why I would prefer to have Trae.
Yeah, and I think like, I don't know, Atlanta. I think they should just do it. I think it should happen. I think both teams
their spacing is already pretty poor, and we want to add like Morant, and
but I don't like. You could sell like, I don't know how I can't. How much younger is Ja than Trae? Is like a couple years. I can't remember.
Well, he's got to be like 2, I think, right? Because Trae is what, 28, 27?
2's the number in my head.
Trae Young is 26, so he's younger than I thought. So they might be closer.
I think Ja's 25.
Oh, Ja Morant's 25?
I think. I just don't quote
me. Yeah, he's 25. He was born in August. He'll turn 26 in August. Trae turns 27 so about 2 years. He turns 27 in September.
Okay.
I think I think if I was the Grizzlies, I would make that deal. But then it's like, you're getting more expensive though, because Trae Young is further along in his max contract, and then he's coming up on his other one. And we're talking about, you're paying Jaren. One of the great things for the Grizzlies about Ja Morant is they just have him under team control for the next 3 years, no options or anything.
Right. I mean, yeah, I guess that's good. We'll see. We'll find out. Yeah, I don't know. Can you promise me Trey is going to shoot better than like league average from 3 ever again? That would be cool.
I actually could promise you that because the Grizzlies, I think, just have more playmaking than Atlanta had around him this year. I think that would make his. He was also dealing with that Achilles injury all year too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good challenge trades by you. I mean, well,
I
2
didn't
of
come up
them.
with the
That one's
Trey
not
one. I
yours,
thought the
but
Franz and the Giannis ones, and what was the other one?
Markkinen.
The Portland one came to me at this moment. I kind of hate it for both teams so much that I want to see it.
I would yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say, oh, I'd do it if I'm Memphis, but that's me. I don't know if Memphis actually would.